Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Modern Divergence MoDiv Spotlight. Today we have Jacqueline and Greg, and they're the co-founders of a social media advocacy initiative called OTs for Neurodiversity, which aims to influence a paradigm shift within the profession of occupational therapy and related health fields. OT for Neurodiversity serves as a platform for amplifying the perspectives of neurodivergent individuals and promoting strength-based lenses. Through a series of tips centered around dismantling neurotypical bias, their account challenges assumptions as it relates to the provision of identifying, affirming, justice-driven support. So thank you both for being here with me today. Our first question will be, can you just tell the listeners a bit more about yourselves?
Sure. So I'm Jacqueline. I'm a second-year occupational therapy student at UNC Chapel Hill. I'm currently doing a fieldwork rotation in the school system, working with neurodivergent adolescents. I'm also the founder of a nonprofit called B3 Coffee. And just in general, in terms of my personality, I consider myself quiet and an observer by nature. I love information seeking, researching, listening, and learning. And I think this is what has allowed me to be so intimately connected to the populations I work with.
It's really amazing. Just a quick question, that nonprofit you run, can you tell me more about what it's about? Is it about coffee or?
Yes, I'm also a coffee aficionado, I would say. B3 Coffee serves as a platform for people of all abilities to achieve a place of positive visibility in the community, as well as just connection and representation.
That's really amazing. So Greg, can we hear a bit more about you?
Sure. I'm Greg. I'm also studying occupational therapy at UNC Chapel Hill in North Carolina. I'm an autistic individual, and I would say that I'm definitely a knowledge seeker and kind of like a more creative. I consider myself creative. Sometimes I'm not, but I strive to be that kind of polymathic model of like, Renaissance Italy, doing master of many, maybe perhaps not expert in any one thing.
I love that. It's amazing. So how are you both doing today? How is COVID affecting you guys, and how's school?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. Really feeling the Zoom fatigue. I'm on Zoom 8 to 4 p.m. every day, so that's rough. But I'm also realizing how much I miss what Greg has coined as peripheral social participation. So not necessarily like directly engaging with people, but just being in public spaces is something that I miss. I used to go to coffee shops a lot, or even just going to the grocery store is not the same. People seem to like not make eye contact, and it's harder to connect with people with masks. So but I'm also really enjoying just discovering the possibilities of virtual engagement. The world is much more interconnected than ever. Technology is advancing. It's just really surreal to witness such a transformative time. And I'm curious how the new normal will look after the pandemic is over. So.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like we're living in like a Zoom world, and I'm completely like a neophyte in a lot of technology. Like just not my thing. So I feel like I've pushed my skills. The COVID has really forced me to kind of push my skills to the next level. And there's this interesting like dichotomy between like what I do for work and school and what I do in my free time. And you've got, on one hand, like I'm learning all these new things, and many of them I intend to use in my practice because I really like some of the online platforms. And then when I have my free time, I basically go back to like 1700 and go for a walk outside or go out in my garden and do something that I could have done 200 years ago, because I just need that mental release and space from being online.
Yeah, I definitely understand. I'm still in school, so I'm in like high school, so I still have to go through a lot of classes virtually. So those have been pretty tiring. Like typically, teenagers were all on our computers, and now we just really want to break away from it. So anyways, how did you two meet and become friends? And I just wanted to know what started this relationship and this collaboration and this bond that you two have.
Sure. So to be transparent, we are dating, and we met in our OT program. I guess you could call us a power couple, as we work together in many different capacities. But we did start off as friends in a very academic manner. We would often exchange articles on topics related to disability studies and the neurodiversity movement. So our first interactions were actually highly structured and stereotypically neurodivergent. We would come up with bullet lists of discussion points to guide our conversations. And now, of course, our interactions are a lot more fluid. And things have changed since then, but our connection, even when it started in that way, was really just undeniable. So
I think also, just for me, like I was a late diagnosis autism, so a lot of the like autistic culture and neurodiversity and those types of I don't know, there's like a huge community and stuff, so I was not aware of it from most of my life. So this was an awesome way for me to kind of learn more about it, become more ingrained in the culture and the society. And to be honest, at the end of the semester, I didn't have much to do anyway. And so I reached out to Jacqueline and was like, give me things to do. And she's like, we can start this project together. I was like, okay, cool.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree. Before like last year, I didn't really know what neurodiversity or neurodivergence was as well. So I'm really glad that, what started as just like an academic thing really grew. That's really amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, so we know you have your Instagram, you've been working on projects. So how do you guys advocate to fight against injustice, discrimination, and stigma within neurodiversity, and exactly why?
Yeah, so I have 3 points to bring up. The first one, and probably the foremost point that I would like to relay, is that amplifying the voices of neurodivergent individuals is so important and should be the center of our advocacy work. I find that often the onus of adaptation is placed on disabled people rather than our society and its institutions. And my question that I always come back to is that, why do the people receiving services not have a say in how it is going to impact them? I think it's so important to recognize neurodivergent people as the experts of their own experience. And it is in our role as professionals to meet them in the middle, to make efforts to better understand autistic and neurodivergent neurology, rather than expecting them to be the ones to always change and fit into neuronormative culture. The second point I wanted to bring up was dismantling the fix-it mentality. And this is something that we have both found is very pervasive in OT and related helping professions. Disability is often used to evoke pity. It may be portrayed as a burden on our system, and it's valued only when overcoming disability or, so fitting in with non-disabled people. And we find this to be really problematic. Remediation approaches operate under this premise that therapy should aim to extinguish or suppress autistic traits. And because our profession is so ingrained in a medical model, autism is widely, quote, treated as a set of deficiencies measured against neurotypical standards. So again, I believe in the power of critical reflection and asking ourselves questions like, who are we trying to make comfortable? Is it the neurodivergent individual and how they experience their traits, or the people who surround them? And, a person does not become more human because they become more familiar to those who deny their humanity or who don't understand them. And my last point that I wanted to bring up was challenging perceptions and measures of outcomes. So, for example, many autistic people feel satisfied with very few social connections, which research interprets as socially isolated, or an autistic person may be most enabled to lead a community engaged and self-determined life in a supported living arrangement, which research defines, as an unconditional ideal. So this constant comparison against neurotypical and Western standards has cast a lot of shame on neurodivergent populations, which has really hindered them from achieving a fulfilling life. And then I also think it's important to question our understanding and reliance on what's called evidence-based practice. So Greg and I are not interested in evidence-based practice if it does not take into consideration lived experience. So again, asking ourselves questions like, did they measure quality of life? Is there a self-advocate movement against the treatment approach that is proposed to be evidence-based? You know, at one point in time, it was evidence-based to put children in restraints. So my point is that this idea of evidence-based should not be an all-encompassing guide for how we deliver services.
Yeah.
So I
have anything to add?
Okay, cool. So like I feel one of the ways that I think you guys, I've been really enjoyed on your site reading some of the materials you've made, and there was a really good one on stigmatization. And I think that the creation of this account helps us kind of challenge the status quo. And I'm really excited to see young people that are also doing that and trying to change those social discourses. Because there's a lot of harmful narratives and stigmas surrounding just disability in general, but also like just what we're talking about, neurodivergent individuals. And one of my favorite quotes is Hans Asperger, when he said, he was actually talking in front of a bunch of Nazis, go figure. And he said, not everything that steps out of line and is thus, quote, abnormal must necessarily be inferior. And I feel, unfortunately, that's kind of where society is. I mean, there's the majority, and then there's everyone else, and especially with disabilities, they're so split up. You've got cerebral palsy, you've got autism, you've got this and that, and it's hard to get one voice behind something. But with the neurodiversity movement, it really serves as an umbrella to kind of create, like, culminate in one like emphatic voice coming from one thing for one cause, which is essentially just to basically celebrate differences and change perceptions and promote equity, because really what we're after is changing minds rather than changing behaviors.
Definitely. I love that so much. That's exactly why Modern Divergent started. Like me and my friend, we both met last year, and that's exactly why we wanted to start something like this. For example, like the, fix it mentality and everything, and the stigma as well. Like those are really two important reasons that I'm glad there's activists and people advocating and working towards helping just everyone who's neurodivergent. Thank you so much.
Yes.
All right. So you guys also own the Instagram account Neurodiversity at OT. So why did you guys create it, and what is your goal if it's different from what you guys mentioned last time?
Yeah, so we created Neurodiversity OT because we were struck by the ableism that pervades so-called helping professions. Our healthcare system has pathologized and devalued neurodiversity to a point where we have suppressed the potential of divergent minds, and that's something we are working to change.
Really amazing.
Yes, and I feel like for me individually, it serves several purposes. Like I said, it's kind of facilitating my growth and understanding of neurodiversity and the culture. And second, it's kind of a platform to get ideas out there and to hear feedback, because like we said, the number one thing you should be concerned with when you're talking about individuals with disability is that their voice is heard. Nothing about us, sorry.
Nothing about us
without us is like a rallying cry in many movements. And third, it just also kind of helps me become more knowledgeable about the neurodiversity culture, which has been really cool, just like hearing other people's opinions and perspectives.
I definitely agree. With every one of these interviews that we do, I get to learn a lot more about, you guys and just the entire culture and the movement, and I really love that. It's really important. So when did you two know that becoming an occupational therapist was the path for you?
Yeah, so I knew that OT was the right path for me because I believe in its core philosophy that all people deserve to experience a full life, regardless of disability or other factors. However, I do plan to pursue a non-traditional path as an OT. I don't think I will fit in well among the restraints of a medical model. Greg probably won't either.
No,
He's
not
had
at
some
all.
experiences. I am passionate about expanding the scope of OT's role in community level justice-oriented work. I believe we have not yet entered these spaces despite our deep understanding of how people function in the relationship to their contexts and environments. So what we do need to realize is, this thing that we're so focused on, occupation, the activities which occupy our time and bring meaning and purpose to our lives. This concept is a site of both oppression and social transformation. So in our role as OTs, we should be responsible for examining these forces, which serve to reinforce those systems, and collaborating with our clients to bend their reality toward equitable access.
So for me, yeah, I agree. Like I like to be, like I said, I like to be creative, and OT. Well, first of all, I was a psychology undergrad, and there's not much you can do with a psychology degree unless you go to further education. And second of all, I really like working with kids. But I needed to be in a space where I can be creative, and I needed to be in a space where I can kind of carve out my own path. And OT allows me to do that because occupation is like a part of every second of every day we're doing. So I thought that was appealing to me. And second, one of my favorite quotes, I actually used it in my entry letter, I think, or maybe an interview or something for UNC, it's Denzel Washington. So he said, "I don't aspire to just make a living. I aspire to make a difference." And I feel like occupational therapy allows me to do this because my success in life, my meaning in life will be measured by the relationships that I create as I work with and support others' growth. And then while they're growing, guess what? I'm also growing, not only as a person, but also a practitioner and in my ability, my knowledge as an individual with a disability.
Yeah, I really love those quotes, by the way.
Thank you. That's how I kind of do. Like whenever I have a speech for class, I just write down quotes that inspire me, and then I pick and choose which ones I want to run with. And so,
really cool. All right, number 7. How is advocating as an autistic individual and someone who is an ally currently exploring where they might fit in the spectrum impact your journey together?
Okay, so from a young age, I've always known I was different in some way. I've always felt like an outsider. And since learning about the unique presentation of autism in females, I have resonated with a lot of what I have read. While I'm not sure if I will ever pursue a formal diagnosis, I'm really driven to advocate for those whose differences have not been accepted and nurtured in the way that mine have. Thankfully, I've been in a lot of social settings growing up where I felt like I could truly be myself. So it has always been easier for me to connect and socially communicate with neurodivergent individuals. And while I will never speak on behalf of them, I can definitely relate to their experience.
So how does advocating as an autistic individual? Let me see. So me being a late diagnosis, it was a little different. I see all these amazing supports, and like there's early intervention that's huge. Unfortunately, there's a huge paucity of resources and interest in transition services. So we get them to age 18 or 22, and then great, you're on your own. But for me, I was a late diagnosis. So a lot of the advocacy and just like learning about my disability was put on me. And it was tricky to navigate. So I think getting these supports and resources at an earlier age, learning more about your culture and about your disability is like a really powerful way to grow. And I guess that's how kind of, I don't know, that's been my journey. So
yeah, thank you both for sharing. Those are really inspiring. And I'm glad that you guys are I'm really just inspired, to be honest. You guys are so amazing.
Well, we feel the same. You got some really great writers.
Thank you. That leads to our next question. Modern Divergence would love to hear what you guys think about what we're doing. And if you have any feedback or advice for what we should work on next, or for any things we should continue improving.
Yeah, we really just love that you are providing a space for neurodivergent youth to be seen and heard. Your generation is the future, and it looks a lot more promising when differences are cast in a positive light. We also really just love the intersectional approach that you all are taking. Not only are you addressing issues of ableism and injustice against the disability community, but we've noticed that you've tackled such a range of problems in social justice in general. So we really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I would say, yeah, like what I was saying, I really liked reading some of the things. There was one on intellectualism for teens or something like that. And that there was a point that was brought up in it very briefly that hits home for me with creativity. And it was talking about how a child can ask why the sky is blue. And I think that I did a speech on that before. I find that idea that it's a childlike curiosity asking the question, why is the sky blue? But if you go to Leonardo da Vinci, you go to Albert Einstein, you go to Benjamin Franklin, all three of them have written in their journals the same question as adults. And two of them came up with theories about actually why. Einstein figured it out. But maintaining that sense of childlike curiosity, pushing those limits, and fostering that just inquisitive nature, I think is something that is really important. And I think that with neurodiversity, there are many different groups that fall under it, like for instance, ADHD, that are kind of almost like geared or built for creative thinking. I mean, if you think about ADHD, your ideas are bouncing around from place to place, but that means you're making a lot of connections, and you may make connections that other people wouldn't make because it's not the common way of thinking. So I think creativity and neurodivergency are completely bound for life. And I think that's really cool.
Definitely. And happy ADHD Awareness Month, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes.
And thank you so much for all the feedback. And we really appreciate that you guys like what we're doing. And our last question for today is, what advice would you give to neurodiverse youth who are watching this today and anyone who is an ally?
Okay, I'll go first. Okay, so my advice for neurodivergent youth is, I guess it's three-parter. It might be four. We'll find out. Don't let other people decide who you are. It rarely ends well when you go out of your way to try to be something you're not. So stay true to yourself and identify those people that that enjoy you for you. And when you embrace those people, you'll be able to rely on them when there's tricky times. Really, the idea with that one is just like choosing happiness over being what society deems as normal. And sometimes that's not realistic, but do your best to be yourself. And number two, I'm a huge believer in the power of failure. You learn a lot more when you make a mistake than when everything's going gravy and nothing's going wrong. And don't let society impose their standards on you, which means you may be moving at a slower pace, you may be moving at a faster pace. Move whatever pace is best for you and learn to self-advocate for yourself when you need support. The biggest hurdle for me was learning and being okay with asking for help. I think that's a big hurdle for a lot of people because this culture in America, we're taught really to be independent, but interdependency is much more realistic. And then finally, like I was saying earlier, neurodivergent people have strengths that other people don't, and a unique perspective on the world that other people don't, because of the differences. And use this. Please use this, because this is what makes you unique. This is what you can leverage that other people are not able to do. And when we're talking about innovation, it's the people that think differently. It's the people that challenge the norms that are really going to push forward, at whatever you're working on.
Yeah, and my advice to allies would be to get connected with the vibrant neurodivergent community on social media. This is really how I got on board with the neurodiversity movement. Listen and learn, and if possible, form relationships with neurodivergent individuals. I find that it's really hard to understand the neurodiversity framework and to really understand the injustice that they're facing. if you don't have any direct connections to individuals who are experiencing that. And when you do form friendships and relationships with people who are different than you, you will come to appreciate their refreshingly authentic way of being, and just the depth and dimension they bring to humanity. So constantly question your assumptions around how people, quote, should be, and acknowledge your own inevitable biases that arise from a culture that is so obsessed with conformity and idealized constructs of normality. And also research as much as you can if you're into that. Several books I can recommend would be Neurotribes and what are some of our other ones?
Neurodivergent Mind is good.
Neurodivergent Mind, the Judy Human book.
That one was okay.
Okay.
Go back and read, what was it? Don't Mourn for Us by Jim Sinclair.
Yes.
That was like the start of, he's a preach fire from the pulpit type guy, but that was really the start of the neurodiversity movement, because he was doing it at a time where a lot of people weren't advocating for themselves in that way.
Oh, and Nothing About Us Without Us. That is such a critical read for the disability rights movement.
Thank you so much. And thank you both for being here today and allowing me to interview you guys and just share your wonderful experiences and just everything that you're advocating for. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having
awesome.
us.